I was also counting on having speaker's notes. Okay. All right. I think I'm finally good to go here. Thanks everybody for your patience. So as I was saying, I'm Skylar Earl. And I just want to remind everybody, by the time I get to the end of this talk, just don't forget that I wanted to give a talk about astrophysics. But instead we're going to talk, because this was requested by a majority of Foundation teammates, we're going to talk about language taboos. Specifically, that which must not be named. This started out as an Odd Salon talk. It was about 3 or 4 years ago. I did make some small edits in order to make it work safe. But virtually everything in this, everyone will find something in this talk slightly uncomfortable. So I want to invite you all to, like, just feel free to step out now or at any point. Like, I won't be offended, because it's in the nature of the subject matter for this to be a little bit uncomfortable. So those of you who decide to stick around, hold on to your butts. Okay, so what is language taboo? It's a phenomenon that comes about when a subject is so delicate that even speaking about it aloud is a socially harmful act with potential consequences. Throughout history, uttering a taboo word in the wrong context can lead to ostracism or imprisonment or even death. So we come up with other ways to talk to these things. One lexical replacement strategy that we employ for mentioning the unmentionable is called euphemism. And euphemism provides us with a word or a phrase that permits a safer indirect reference to a taboo subject. So everyone knows what you're talking about, but somehow it's less offensive. The antonym of this concept is a dysphemism, which is a word or a phrase that's calculated to call direct attention to the taboo subject. And we'll look at both of these today. So does this image cause you some kind of emotional response? I mean, it's just a sign advertising the clothing store French Connection UK, right? So there's 3 things to note about this image, right? So the first is that the company's branding draws a lot of negative attention. They actually profit from this, right? Because 2, taboo words are titillating, right? So taboo serves a role in maintaining the order of society, but the promise of violating these restrictions offers a kind of excitement, right? And so people are both repelled and drawn to language taboo. And of course, the other thing is that this image actually avoids taboo violation by inverting 2 of the word's letters. And so mispronouncing or misspelling a taboo word or replacing it with a similar sounding word is actually a well-known phenomenon. It's called taboo deformation. And it's an incredibly common strategy for mentioning the unmentionable. So by and large, the subjects of language taboo mirror other forms of taboo in human societies. And so as a result, the subjects of language taboo are pretty much a lot of the same things that really concern human beings, the world around. Many language taboos relate to a primal human belief in the magical powers of verbal communication, right? So humans have always believed that there was a direct supernatural connection between the words that we say and the things that they refer to. So the power of knowing a person's true name, for example, appears in the Odyssey. It appears in the legend of Isis and Ra. It appears in the fairy tale of Rumpelstiltskin and legends about demons and countless other narratives. Even today, in some societies, individuals will refrain from offering their own personal name or even from uttering it aloud, because giving out your true name can make you into a verbal voodoo doll in the mouths of others. So consider, just for example, the different words that are found in modern Indo-European languages for the animal that we call the bear. The prevailing theory is that the mighty bear was a totem animal to the ancestors of Indo-European people associated with primeval forces. And so to invoke the bear by its true name was to risk attracting its attention and potentially its fearsome wrath. So the result is that the totem animal becomes a euphemism, right? It acquires this way of alluding to that which must not be named, right? We call it, the brown one or the shaggy one or the honey eater. Right. And so you see how, like, through the magic of words, because words are magical, right? We've always relied on euphemism to speak of the supernatural and the divine. The practice of taboo naming, the taboo on naming the divine, rather, was perfected by my own people, the Jews. The 3rd commandment says very clearly, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain." And so the result is that we discarded the vowel markings on the written name of God so that you couldn't say it out loud. And the result is that we now have no idea how it was originally pronounced. So then we started inventing euphemisms for mentioning the divine, particularly my Lord. But then soon this word became too sacred to use in other contexts. So then we started referring to God as the name, quite literally. And then in writing, we actually abbreviate that word. And even in English, many devout Jews will refrain from including the central vowel in the English word just to be on the safe side. The same prohibition extends in many cultures to referring to powerful people by name, especially royalty. Some of you, I would say virtually all of you, have probably heard of this individual. They are better known in English as Emperor Hirohito, but that name is actually no longer polite to use in German society, Japanese society, because after his passing, the emperor is regarded as a semi-divine figure and can't be referred to that way. Ancient Chinese historians also got around similar prohibitions when writing about deceased monarchs by leaving out ideographic strokes, which was a kind of taboo deformation. So avoidance of speaking of death, by the way, and the dead is one of the more pervasive language taboos, probably because death is one of our most pervasive fears. So consider how we find ourselves saying of the deceased that they have departed or passed away rather than he died. Some taboos take this so far as to place the personal names of the dead under taboo, sometimes for a period of mourning, but sometimes forever. So much like as Indo-Europeans referred to bears by different euphemisms, in some cultures, people will refer to, the old lady or the tall one when they're referring to the deceased, if at all. And in some East African and Austronesian societies, names are often taken from everyday objects. I mean, we do that too, right? But this impels communities to find permanent euphemisms for any word that resembles the name of some departed soul. So imagine a guy named River dies, and then his entire community has to find and forever after use some other word to refer to a river. This sometimes causes language associated with these cultures to evolve very rapidly, much to the consternation of sociolinguists. So, of course, every language has euphemisms for excrement and mostly for other body fluids. And these language taboos obviously relate to a kind of a universal human concern with contamination and purity. And this obviously extends as far as describing acts of excretion. So, for example, I have a friend who always refers to powdering her nose instead of the more prosaic answering the call of nature. I myself prefer to avail myself of the facilities. A really word of this topic is coprolalia, which is a condition which leads its sufferers to swear uncontrollably. This disorder may be related to abnormalities in the amygdala, which is a region of the brain that normally oversees emotions such as anger and aggression. And so it's clear that taboo, euphemism, and dysphemism are wired very deeply in our brains. Personally, I think the word coprolalia is kind of cool, but I have to admit that this emoji always makes me super uncomfortable. Special mention among taboo topics goes out to menstruation, which has the advantage of being related to both excretion and sex, leading to some of the most colorful euphemisms. In communist era Poland, a menstruating woman might be having her May Day parade. In Britain, the traditional red-coated army uniform is the source of euphemisms such as the cavalry's here, I'm entertaining the general, and even a French woman might say, j'ai mon anglais. So the final topic I want to talk about in the subject of language taboo is your mother, which is, or rather, that great source of unpleasant anxiety, your wife's mother. In many societies, men are proscribed from speaking to their mother-in-law and vice versa, probably for good reason. So the practice of, I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Hlonifa in Bantu languages like Zulu and Xhosa, goes one further and prohibits women from uttering any syllables in a husband or male relative's name in any other word. Unlike the other Bantu languages, these languages employ click consonants. And the theory is that the Bantu and Xhosa acquired these consonants in the language partly as a way of women trying to get around the prohibition on saying even the syllables in these names. This is known as avoidance speech, or some sociolinguists refer to this as mother-in-law speech. So I really wish that we had time to cover the other major sources of language taboo, like swearing, disease, decay, poverty, food, body parts, or sex work. And honestly, originally when I wrote this talk, I thought it was to be like 10 minutes of me just like rattling off lists of funny euphemisms, but I think that there's something more important going on here. So today we may like to think of ourselves as being modern and rational, right? But contemporary examples of superstitious taboo abound sometimes in surprising places, right? The fact is that language taboos evolve ineluctably over time, and euphemisms become taboo even as taboo words become normative, right? So for example, members of our society who were once known as friends of Dorothy are increasingly have the freedom to identify safely as gay, lesbian, transgender, intersex, asexual, queer, or questioning. And in many ways, our culture has begun to move on from supernatural taboos to taboos against dehumanizing one another with our speech. And this is right and good. right? Some of our strongest word taboos today are those which degrade people on culture, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, or disability status, right? And this is very definitely as it should be. So the human belief in the magical power of words may no longer be universal, but nevertheless, your words have power. You possess the power to create involuntary thoughts and emotional responses in others simply by speaking words to them, right? So word taboos and their euphemisms serve as a kind of empathetic non-aggression pact between all of us, or between members of a society or people in a professional setting. Taboo and euphemism are universals because they buffer us from that reflexive power that we hold over each other's minds through language. In American society today, we cherish the right to speak our minds, but things are changing. In this era of unprecedented freedom and global communication, we have to ask ourselves what kinds of speech we will accept and what kinds of speech must become taboo so that our society does not bear the attendant consequences. That's it. Thanks very much.